Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, doing another quick, raw review, this time of the new De La Soul album and the Anonymous Nobody. De La Soul, quintessential hip-hop trio, back with a new record, a comeback record, another comeback record, which of course had me hesitant because comeback records generally not that good, usually pretty disappointing, but you do have those comeback records every once in a while that do turn out great. And if there is a trio that I have faith could come together with a good comeback record, it is De La Soul, because they've always kind of had this really vibrant, crazy, fun personality. They're really eccentric. So you figure that they got to do something wild with a new record. They can't just come out with some boring 12-track album with a bunch of songs that all sound the same, You got to expect that there's going to be instrumental shifts. There's got to be skits and stuff like that. So De La Soul, you have to, anticipate at least something interesting. And while the trio certainly tried, I'm not saying they half-assed anything on this project for sure, they just kind of ended up with this really inconsistent album. It's kind of like a clash of different sounds and moods that, excuse me, that I don't think particularly work all that well together. For one, there's a handful of tracks on here where it seems like the trio is really going super self-serious, and I don't really find these moments all that compelling. Not only because I feel like it kind of derails this album, which already has so little momentum to begin with, because it's always changing, it's always doing something different, it's always detouring. But also, I don't really feel like the trio makes that many poignant statements on these cuts. Then we have these songs that feature some pretty surprising guests. I mean, there's actually a really impressive guest list on this project. A guest list that, on the surface, would have made me really excited and did make me really excited to listen to it. We have guests that are big names that totally make sense, and I could see collaborating with De La Soul really effectively. Snoop Dogg, Estelle, Jill Scott, Pete Rock. But then there's some really surprising names on here that are really coming out of left field. I don't want to mess his name up. Mr. Justin Hawkins, I believe. Also David Byrne of Talking Heads fame, Damon Albarn of Gorillaz and Blur fame, 2 Chainz, as well as Little Dragon, a pop outfit Little Dragon. So again, a lot of surprising names on this thing, but for the most part, all the names that you wouldn't expect to be associated with De La Soul really derail the record. Not only do they bring a musical vibe and sound that I just would never really want to hear on a De La Soul album, but these guests take over the track so much that it's almost like De La Soul just hands the album over to them for a few moments to change the album into something that fits their image more than it does De La Soul. It sounds like I'm listening to a Damon Albarn track featuring De La Soul. It sounds like I'm listening to a Little Dragon track featuring De La Soul. It sounds like I'm listening to a David Byrne song featuring De La Soul, and so on and so forth. There are a few moments on here where I think the duo pulls together tracks that sound like something that they would have put out back in the day, and not to say that hey, as long as they stick to their old sound, that's good. I appreciate that they wanted to progress, that they wanted to evolve, that they wanted to do something different. But you can't disagree that on the 2 Chainz track and on the track Nosed Up, for example, the trio really plays to their strengths. These are fun, eccentric, catchy tracks with engaging verses, with a lot of witty, comedic lines. This is sort of what the trio seems to do best. If they had actually managed to make some of these collaborations a little more effective and sort of be a little more collaborative, a little more 50-50, rather than it just kind of feeling like they're passing the keys off to Little Dragon to kind of just take over the whole track, and then they just kind of hop on it, and then they're calling it a De La Soul song. If the collaborations has been a little more split, if it felt like there was just less input from the feature and more input from De La Soul on these tracks, and the more low-key tracks that are trying to be more emotional, trying to be more mature, maybe if they just kind of brought their points home better a little bit more, or if they were just a little more engaging. There's one kind of poignant moment on the record right at the start, which I felt was a little self-serving, with Jill Scott, where she's talking about, hey, when nobody loves something, when something's irrelevant, that's when you gotta love it. That's when you gotta love something the most. And I appreciate the sentiment of that, but it seems like at the beginning of the record, De La Soul is telling us how we have to feel about this album before we even listen to the album, which I thought was a huge turnoff. If the album's good and if the album is worth loving, then people will love it. you know, and that's really all there is to it. You know, you should love something not because other people love it and not because other people don't love it. Those are two stupid reasons to love something. You should love something, especially an album, if it appeals to you. You know, if you think the music is great, if you think the performances are good, if you think the statements the album is making make sense and you know, are relatable to you, or you know, touch you in some way emotionally. And unfortunately, that just was not the case for me. You know, I didn't get much of any of those things from this record. You know, musical entertainment, interesting performances, you know, and sort of a sound that I feel like is distinctly De La Soul. You know, there are a couple tracks here that feel that way. Then there's a series of tracks that just feel pretty drab and moody. And there's a bunch of tracks where I feel like I'm just listening, oh, this isn't De La Soul, this is David Byrne, this is Damon Albarn, this is Justin Hawkins, this is Little Dragon, and so on and so on and so on. So unfortunately, I was pretty underwhelmed by this thing just because of how inconsistent it is. Again, I know De La Soul has this tendency to jump around and not really just kind of deliver this uniform type of record. But I feel like, I don't know, they just kind of let that tendency get the better of them this time around and really just kind of lost control of this album in a way, in my opinion anyway. But those are my thoughts on this record. Did you give this thing a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, De La Soul, forever.